Sign this or I'll ruin your career. The words cracked through the conference room like a gunshot. My new boss, Nathan Cole, didn't just push the resignation letter toward me. He slammed it down, hard enough that the glass tabletop trembled. His fingers, long and rigid, pressed against the edge of the paper as if daring me to refuse. I stared at the typed words. Voluntary resignation, effective immediately. The walls of the sleek conference room seemed to shrink around me, the air thick with tension. Just outside the glass, employees passed by, oblivious. Nathan's voice dropped to a venomous whisper. Be smart, Lisa. You won't find work in this industry again if you cross me. I forced my face blank, even as a dozen memories hit me at once. Late nights perfecting reports he took credit for. Ideas stolen in boardrooms while he smirked like a king. And just last week, catching discrepancies in client invoices. Numbers that didn't make sense. Numbers that Nathan didn't want me looking at. I should have been scared. Maybe I was a little. But more than fear, something sharper stirred inside me. Because what Nathan didn't know was, I'd been preparing for this moment for weeks. I lifted the pen slowly, heart pounding, and signed. But not before my eyes flicked to one phrase in the middle of the standard form. I changed a single word. One word. The difference between a clean exit and a legal time bomb. Before I take you further into this story, you need to understand something critical. Power isn't about titles. It's about knowing exactly when and how to push back. If you've ever felt like you had no choice, if you've been cornered by someone with more power, stay with me. Because what I'm about to share isn't just about revenge. It's about knowing your worth when someone tries to erase it. My name is Lisa Grant. I'm 35, single, financial operations manager with a decade of experience in corporate compliance. And no, I'm not a risk taker. I plan everything. I color code my calendar. I read every contract twice. And I grew up watching my father run a small accounting firm where every decimal mattered. Always double-check the details, Lisa. He used to say, the smallest clause can change the whole outcome. I lived by that. It's how I climbed my way up from a junior analyst role to managing multi-million-dollar portfolios. It's also why I noticed within 3 months of Nathan's arrival, things weren't adding up. Nathan Cole transferred in from the East Coast with a reputation for shaking things up. Tall, charismatic, ruthless, the kind of man who made deals with a handshake and a threat wrapped in a smile. At first, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. But then, the cracks appeared. It started small. A bonus report that included unauthorized figures, an expense claim with a vendor I didn't recognize. At first, I assumed it was a mistake, until I cross-checked old records and realized the numbers had been manipulated. I brought it up once, carefully. These transfers don't align with our policy. I think we should flag them. Nathan didn't even look up from his laptop. Not your concern. Just process them. I didn't argue. I started documenting. Emails, screenshots, printed reports, every discrepancy, every shady approval. Because people like Nathan count on you being too scared or too compliant to stand your ground. Then came the performance review. After 8 years of exceeding expectations, suddenly I was labeled difficult, lacking team spirit. And I knew exactly where this was heading. He was setting me up to fail. The ultimatum came 2 weeks later. A surprise meeting. No agenda, no HR, just Nathan, the letter, and the threat. I signed. With a word changed, with everything I needed in place. When Nathan snatched the paper from me, his grin said he thought he'd won. I stood, met his eyes, and said quietly, I'll have my copy. Please? His grin flickered. HR will follow up, he said, waving me off like I was nothing. I nodded, because tomorrow, HR would follow up. And Nathan Cole was about to learn what happens when you threaten someone who knows exactly how much power a single word can hold. I left the conference room without looking back. Nathan didn't even bother to watch me go. He was already typing on his phone, probably messaging HR to finalize my exit. I didn't slam the door. I didn't make a scene. That's not how you win. I walked calmly to my office, gathered my things into a single box, and placed a neatly labeled envelope on my desk. It contained everything I'd been collecting for the last 2 months. Records of altered transactions. Emails where Nathan ordered me to process without question. Copies of the expense reports with inflated vendor payments. Screenshots of system changes traced back to Nathan's login. And of course, a copy of the resignation letter I'd just signed, where I had crossed out voluntary and written in forced resignation under duress. It was legal language I'd learned from weeks of reading employment law cases after work. One phrase, enough to turn a resignation into a potential wrongful termination claim. I slipped the envelope into my bag and checked my phone. A single message blinked on the screen. "You did it?" It was from Harper, my friend in legal, the only person who knew everything. "Yes, I'm coming now," I replied. Harper worked in Beckman and Lee, our company's retained employment law firm. We'd met in a corporate workshop 3 years ago. Unlike most corporate attorneys, Harper had a soft spot for employees who got steamrolled by toxic management. She also happened to be the one who'd told me exactly what phrase to insert into that letter. I met her at a small cafe 2 blocks from the office. She took one look at me, her sharp blue eyes scanning my expression. "You kept calm?" I nodded. She gave a satisfied smile. "Good. That's half the battle. The next half is letting HR walk straight into their own trap." I handed her the envelope. She leafed through it without speaking, only raising an eyebrow at one point. "Vendor kickbacks?" "Looks like it," I said quietly. Same 2 vendors, over and over. Both started showing up after Nathan arrived. Harper set the documents down and met my eyes. "Lisa, you realize this isn't just a wrongful dismissal case. If this holds up, it's procurement fraud, corporate liability, potential federal investigation." I didn't blink. "That's why I've got copies and backups. And yes, timestamps on everything." She exhaled, nodding. "I'll forward this to their internal legal team in the morning, after HR processes your paperwork. Don't worry. The moment they realize what you've done, they'll go into panic mode." That word, panic, stuck with me. Because Nathan? He didn't panic. He made other people panic. At least, that's what he thought. The next morning, I walked into the HR office at exactly 9 a.m., holding my boxed belongings. Tina, the HR manager, gave me a rehearsed smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Lisa, thank you for coming in. We'll just finalize your paperwork and escort you out." I nodded politely. "Of course, I'll need a signed copy of the resignation acknowledgement for my records." She hesitated, flipping through her folder. "Well, actually, we'll send you a digital confirmation." "I'll wait," I said, keeping my voice even. "I'd like it signed today. That's company policy, isn't it?" She blinked, caught off guard. Yes. Give me a moment." I watched as she stepped into the HR director's office. A muted conversation followed. 30 seconds later, she reappeared. Her expression changed. Tighter. "The director would like to speak with you." I followed her into the office, my heart beating steady but hard. Mark Davidson, head of HR, stood behind his desk. He gestured for me to sit. And then, he dropped a single sheet of paper on the table between us. My resignation letter, with my handwritten edit staring back at him. Forced resignation under duress. His eyes lifted to mine. "Lisa, what is this?" I met his gaze without flinching. "It's exactly what happened. I signed under threat in a closed-door meeting with no HR present. And I've documented everything." For a moment, there was silence. Then Mark cleared his throat. See, we'll need to review this further before finalizing any paperwork." I nodded, rising to leave. "I'll wait for your response. My attorney will too." As I stepped into the hallway, I saw it. A flash of movement at the far end. Nathan, standing by the elevators. He was laughing with another executive, still thinking he'd won. I walked past without acknowledging him. Because tomorrow, HR would summon him. And Nathan Cole was about to learn that the smallest word on a page could unravel everything he'd built on intimidation. The call came the next morning at 8:12 a.m. I was sipping my coffee when my phone lit up with a number I recognized. HR Direct Line. I took a slow breath before answering. Lisa Grant speaking. Lisa, this is Mark Davidson. His voice sounded stiffer than usual. We've reviewed the document you submitted yesterday. We'll need you to come in this morning for a formal discussion regarding your resignation and certain concerns that have been raised. I let a beat pass. Will my legal representative be welcome in this discussion? A pause. Yes, that would be advisable. I hung up, texted Harper, and met her at a coffee shop near the office by 8:45. She was already waiting, phone in hand, reading something on her tablet. They called? She asked without looking up. I nodded. Mark wants a formal discussion. Harper closed the tablet and gave a satisfied smile. Good. That means they've realized they're in deep. Let's go. We arrived at the HR floor just before 9. As we walked in, I noticed something immediately. The usual relaxed morning chatter wasn't there. People moved briskly through the halls, heads down. Doors closed a little too quickly when we passed. The atmosphere had shifted. Inside the main conference room, Mark Davidson sat at the head of the table. Next to him was Tina, her polite smile replaced by something tight and cautious. To my surprise, Pascal Green, the company's internal counsel, was also present, a man I'd only seen at company-wide meetings. Ms. Grant, Ms. Harper, thank you for coming, Mark began, his voice carefully formal. I nodded, Harper giving him a cool glance. Mark cleared his throat. We've reviewed the resignation letter and the circumstances surrounding it. We are concerned about the language you included and the allegations you've submitted. I met his eyes. I documented everything, Mark. I didn't want it to come to this, but Nathan Cole gave me no choice. He shifted uncomfortably. We've also begun an internal review of the financial discrepancies you highlighted in your supporting documents. Pascal interjected. If these discrepancies are accurate, and preliminary checks suggest they may be, this situation extends beyond employment law. There could be significant compliance violations and potential legal exposure for the company. Harper leaned forward slightly. I'm glad you recognize the seriousness. My client's priority is ensuring accountability. We expect the company to take immediate steps to address this, starting with the actions of Mr. Cole. Mark nodded, his jaw tight. Mr. Cole has been called in for a meeting later this morning. I felt my heart give a single, quiet thud. It was happening. Has he been informed of the financial review? Harper asked. Mark shook his head. Not yet. We want to hear his explanation before we take further steps. Pascal added, but rest assured, this will be handled thoroughly. I leaned back slightly, keeping my expression calm. I hope so, because I'm prepared to escalate this externally if necessary. Mark gave a shallow nod. Understood. An hour later, I was back at my desk, or rather at the spare workstation they'd assigned me near the compliance team. I was organizing my files when I saw him. Nathan, striding across the floor, flanked by Tina and Mark. He looked irritated, not nervous, not yet. His jaw set, his eyes sharp as always. To him, this was just another performance review, another little fire he'd charm or threaten his way out of. But I noticed something different. People weren't smiling at him this morning. No greetings, no casual waves. They looked away. Nathan didn't seem to notice. They disappeared into the glass conference room at the end of the hall. Harper, who'd stayed close by, came to stand beside me. He doesn't know yet, she murmured. I nodded. He will. I watched through the glass wall as Mark slid a folder across the table. Nathan picked it up, glanced at it, and his expression shifted. The slight smirk faltered. His hand holding the paper stilled. He said something. I couldn't hear it, but Mark shook his head. Pascal leaned in, pointing to a document inside the folder. Nathan's shoulders straightened, defensive now. His mouth tightened. Harper whispered, and there it is. A beat later, Nathan's eyes lifted and locked on me through the glass. For the first time since he'd arrived at the company, I saw it. Not irritation, not arrogance, fear. And in that exact moment, I knew. Nathan Cole's grip on this company and on my career had just slipped. For a man like Nathan Cole, fear wasn't a familiar feeling. He thrived on control, on making people scramble to please him. But in that glass-walled conference room, with 3 senior executives staring him down, his composure cracked. I watched as Mark spoke, his hands folded calmly on the table. Nathan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a defensive posture if I'd ever seen one. Every few seconds, his eyes darted toward Pascal, the company's counsel. From my vantage point, I couldn't hear the words, but body language tells stories louder than voices ever could. The smirk was gone. The arrogance had shifted into tightly restrained frustration. His eyes flicked toward the hallway, toward me. Once, then again. He knew. He knew I was the reason he was sitting in that chair. I stayed at my workstation, reviewing files I'd already read 3 times, waiting. I didn't need to be in the room. The facts were already speaking for me. By noon, Harper and I were called back into HR. Nathan wasn't there. But the tension in the air felt electric. Mark folded his hands on the table, his expression unreadable. We've placed Mr. Cole on administrative leave, effective immediately, pending a full investigation. I met his eyes. And what exactly does that mean? Pascal answered before Mark could. It means he's been relieved of all duties, his access revoked, and instructed not to contact any employees. Standard protocol while we investigate both the hostile work environment claims and the financial discrepancies. Harper nodded slightly. That's a start. Mark exhaled. We're also bringing in an independent auditing firm to review the vendor transactions. I felt a small knot in my chest loosen. Not relief, not yet, but something closer to validation. We'll cooperate fully, I said, keeping my tone even. I assume the investigation will include interviews with other employees? Pascal gave a curt nod. Yes, we've already had 2 staff members come forward this morning regarding similar experiences with Mr. Cole. Harper gave me a glance, her expression quietly approving. This wasn't just about me anymore. It never had been. That afternoon, I returned to my desk, half expecting whispers or stares. Instead, something unexpected happened. One by one, colleagues stopped by my workstation. No grand gestures, no confessions, just small comments. Good on you, Lisa. If you ever need backup. Wish I'd said something sooner. Even Theo, a junior analyst who'd always kept his head down, dropped off a coffee and whispered, "Thanks for standing up." He used to talk to me like I was dirt. It hit me harder than I expected. For months, I'd felt isolated, like I was imagining the patterns. But now, they saw it too. Nathan's control hadn't just cracked. It had shattered. By Friday, rumors swirled like wildfire. Word spread that Nathan had been escorted from the building after trying to access restricted files. An emergency audit team set up shop on the 10th floor. Vendor contracts Nathan had pushed through were frozen for review. And more employees started speaking up, both men and women. Stories surfaced of manipulated project reports, inappropriate comments, threatened careers. Each testimony chipped away at the wall Nathan had built around himself. I spent the next week in back-to-back interviews with auditors, compliance officers, and HR representatives. I told the truth. Every detail. No exaggeration, no assumptions. Just facts. Every piece of evidence I documented matched. Every timeline aligned. and the deeper they dug, the worse it looked for Nathan. Late Friday evening, as I packed up my laptop, I got a message. Harper. Preliminary findings. Nathan's facing potential charges. You good? I stared at the screen for a long moment. I wasn't sure what I felt. Pride? Satisfaction? Maybe, but mostly a quiet sense of rightness. I typed back. I'm good. Thank you. She replied a second later. Number thank you. You didn't just protect yourself. You changed something bigger. I stared out the office window, watching the city lights flicker in the dusk. Harper was right. This wasn't about revenge. It was about refusing to be another silent casualty. Nathan Cole had underestimated one simple truth. When enough people stop being afraid, even the strongest walls collapse. By Monday morning, Nathan's name had vanished from the company directory. His office, once a fortress of closed-door meetings and whispered threats, stood empty. The blinds were drawn, the nameplate removed. No announcement had been made. But in corporate environments, silence speaks volumes. People pretended not to notice. But they noticed. I returned to my new workstation in the compliance wing, still technically in limbo. HR hadn't formalized my reinstatement yet, pending investigation outcome. But unofficially, I was working, attending meetings, contributing to project reviews. I was visible again. And for the first time in months, I felt like I belonged there. The independent audit team wasted no time. By midweek, they uncovered the depth of Nathan's scheme. Inflated vendor contracts linked to companies owned by his former business partners, falsified approval chains, altered performance metrics on procurement reports, over $750,000 in suspicious transactions traced directly back to Nathan's oversight. And that wasn't the worst of it. The auditors discovered email correspondence implying certain senior managers had either ignored irregularities or actively looked the other way. This wasn't just Nathan's mess. It was a company-wide blind spot, and it was about to cost them dearly. On Thursday, I was called into a leadership meeting, this time as a key participant, not a target. Aubrey Carter, the CEO herself, sat at the head of the long conference table. I'd only met her once before, during a quarterly town hall. In person, she was sharper than I remembered. Eyes that missed nothing, a quiet authority in her posture. Beside her sat Pascal, the company's general counsel, and Mark Davidson, head of HR. Harper was by my side. Aubrey spoke first. Lisa, thank you for joining us. We've reviewed the findings of both the internal investigation and the independent audit. She folded her hands. Your documentation was not only accurate, it was critical in uncovering systemic failures within our procurement oversight. I stayed silent, letting her continue. We recognize the impact this has had on you personally and on your professional standing, and we intend to make it right. I exchanged a brief glance with Harper. This wasn't a courtesy meeting. This was a damage control move. Aubrey nodded toward Mark. We'd like to offer formal reinstatement to your previous role, with retroactive pay and a public acknowledgement of your contributions to the integrity of this company. I met her gaze evenly. And what about the others? Mark frowned slightly. I'm sorry? The other employees Nathan targeted, the ones who came forward. What happens to them? Pascal cleared his throat. We're reviewing each case individually. Rest assured, no retaliatory action will be taken against any employee who cooperated in the investigation. I nodded slowly, but I wasn't satisfied. Not yet. What changes will be made to prevent this from happening again? I asked. Aubrey leaned back slightly. We're restructuring the compliance department and implementing a mandatory ethics training program for all management. Anonymous reporting channels are being established, with oversight from an independent committee. Harper leaned forward. And Lisa's role? Aubrey gave a small, calculated smile. We'd like Lisa to lead the new compliance integrity program, reporting directly to me. The room fell silent. I felt Harper glance at me, but I kept my eyes on Aubrey. This wasn't the victory I'd imagined. It was bigger. It wasn't just about reclaiming my job. It was about shaping the system I'd nearly been destroyed by. I took a slow breath. I'll accept with one condition. Aubrey's eyebrows lifted. Name it. That every person who came forward gets the same protection I did. No exceptions, no quiet demotions. And that this company issues a formal statement, not to praise me, but to acknowledge that silence enabled this to happen. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then Aubrey gave a slow nod. Agreed. That afternoon, Harper and I walked out of the building together. You could have named your price, she said, glancing sideways at me. I shook my head. This was never about a paycheck. It was about stopping it from happening again. Harper smiled. You know, most people cave before it gets to this point. They settle. They disappear. I met her gaze, the weight of the last few months settling somewhere deep inside me. Then maybe it's time more of us stop disappearing. 2 weeks later, the official announcement went out. Beckman & Lee implements new compliance integrity program, led by Lisa Grant, head of corporate integrity. It was a sanitized corporate press release full of words like transparency, accountability, and renewed commitment to ethical leadership. But between the lines, everyone inside the company knew the truth. Nathan Cole wasn't coming back, and the culture that had quietly enabled people like him wasn't coming back either. The day the memo went public, I stood at the edge of the crowded lobby, watching employees skim their emails on phones and tablets. The reactions were subtle. A few exchanged glances. One or two gave quiet nods. No applause. No banners. That was fine by me. Real change doesn't come with a fanfare. It comes with trust earned over time. My first act in the new role was to hold an open-door session for every employee who wanted to speak. No management present, no notes taken. It wasn't a strategy meeting. It wasn't a PR stunt. It was a listening session. And they came. From junior analysts to longtime project managers, they trickled in. One by one, then in small groups. Some shared stories of minor grievances. Some shared real fears they'd buried for years. A few simply said, "Thank you." By the end of the first week, I'd spoken to over 50 people. Some left the room lighter than they'd entered. Others left with my promise. This won't be ignored. I thought stepping into this role would feel like vindication, but it didn't. It felt like responsibility. Harper summed it up best during one of our late-night calls. When you stand up, people assume you want revenge. They don't realize sometimes you're just tired of watching the wrong people win. She was right. Nathan's story didn't end quietly. A formal investigation revealed that his financial manipulations stretched back to his previous company. Charges were filed. His name hit industry headlines, not as a rising star, but as a cautionary tale. I never heard from him again. No emails, no threats, nothing. And I didn't need to. Some battles are won not by destroying your opponent, but by refusing to let them destroy you. 3 months into my new role, I got called into Aubrey's office. She closed the door behind me, a rare gesture for a CEO, and motioned for me to sit. "I wanted to thank you again," she said quietly. "Not just for standing your ground, but for challenging us to be better." I gave a small nod. I didn't do it alone. Aubrey smiled faintly. "That's what makes it matter." She paused, folding her hands on the desk. "We're considering rolling out the Compliance Integrity Program company-wide, including our overseas branches, and I want you to lead that expansion." I blinked. That wasn't just a promotion. It was a seismic shift. "I need time to think," I said honestly. "Of course." I stood to leave, but something made me stop at the door. "Aubrey, people don't speak up because they're afraid nothing will change. Or worse, that speaking up will make them a target." She met my eyes. "I know. Let's prove them wrong." Her smile softened. "Let's." That night, I walked home through the city streets. Cool air on my face, the distant hum of traffic in my ears. I thought about the first time I'd sat across from Nathan in that conference room. how small I'd felt, how alone, and how different this felt now. Because standing up didn't ruin me. It didn't end my career. It reshaped it. In the end, this wasn't a story about revenge. It was about reclaiming the space people tried to push me out of. It was about showing others that silence isn't the only option. It was about knowing the difference between walking away and standing your ground when it matters most. And maybe it was about one simple truth my father taught me when I was young. The smallest details change the biggest outcomes. One word on a resignation letter, one choice to speak up, one refusal to stay silent. Those choices didn't just change my career. They changed the culture around me. And if there's one thing I want you to remember from my story, it's this. Power doesn't belong to those who threaten you. It belongs to those who refuse to be threatened. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If you've ever faced a moment where you wondered if standing up was worth the risk, I hope you'll remember. Sometimes the smallest action can create a ripple no one sees coming. And sometimes that ripple becomes a wave.